point, but we'll introduce ourselves anyway. My name is Mindy Freund. I'm the Director of Patient Services for the American Brain Tumor Association. I have been with ABTA for a little over 2 years now. My background in history is in neuroscience nursing and brain tumor clinical research nursing. So it's been an honor to be here with you guys. I'm actually absolutely loving this conference. I hope you all are too. It's so great to meet so many of you. I'll hand it over to Ambreen.
Hi, everyone. Oh, is this on? I forgot to turn it on. That would help. Hi, everyone. My name's Ambreen. I'm a program manager on the patient services team at the ABTA, where I manage our webinar series, our online support community, and events like this. A little background, I'm also a licensed social worker and a 12-year cancer survivor myself. Didn't have a brain tumor, but I can kind of relate to a lot of what we're going to be talking about today when it comes to finding meaning and a purpose after a crazy diagnosis like a brain tumor. And I'll have Mindy go ahead and introduce our objectives.
So these are disclaimers. Our learning goals for our presentation here is to understand the strategies to find a new meaning after a brain tumor diagnosis, to learn about participating in patient advocacy organizations, and how to build your community.
All right, so there are a lot of things that make us who we are. This is obviously an oversimplified version of that. Our friends, our family, our pets, our fur babies, our career, our education, the things that we like, the music we listen to, our faith and spirituality, these are all examples of things that make us who we are. And then you get this label slapped on yourself when you're diagnosed with a brain tumor, and everything changes. You have a diagnosis, you're going to treatments, you have these symptoms and side effects, you're fatigued, you're tired, you're stressed, you're scared. And all of a sudden, all those things that made you feel like they're out of reach. They're changed, it's different. Things are not the same as they were before your diagnosis. And you start to wonder, who am I? Who am I now that I have this label of a brain tumor? How many of you have felt a sense of loss of control when you were diagnosed or your loved one was diagnosed with a tumor? So I see a couple. How many of you still feel that way? Yeah, that's a very common experience to go through when you're going through something like a brain tumor. This is huge. So yeah, you're gonna feel like so much is out of your control because you didn't ask for a brain tumor, but you got one. And what we hope that you can gain from this presentation is that although there is a lot that is no longer in your control, you can still find your voice. You can still be you. You have a brain tumor, but you are not defined by your brain tumor. Things may look different now, but you can still be you, just in a modified way. So to kick off, we thought we'd start with just a little bit of a discussion. You know, we talked about some of the changes that happen after cancer diagnosis, and all of a sudden you don't feel like you anymore. So we wanted to ask you, we wanted to get some insight from you. What has been one of the most challenging changes after you or your loved one's brain tumor diagnosis? Maybe it's the fear of the unknown, or no longer being able to work, or changes in your relationship. Would anyone like to share what they feel like has been one of the most challenging changes? Yeah.
So for me, one of my symptoms from the brain tumor is seizures, and at least where I live, you can't drive for 6 months after a seizure, so that's been really challenging, losing that independence.
Yes, that loss of independence because you can no longer drive. That's a great one. I mean, not a great one to have, but a great example.
Yeah, for me, it's been mostly, I'm a long-term survivor, but over the last handful of years, not being able to work anymore.
Thank you. For me, it's hearing. I lost all of my hearing in my right ear, rendered, hearing impaired, American disabilities and all of that kind of stuff. And to have to acknowledge the fact that I am totally deaf in one ear is huge for me.
For me, it is sharing my story to raise awareness without making people feel like, oh, here we go again.
As a long-term survivor, initially it was losing all my friends, and then it was accepting that, and then it was making new friends and who met me where I was, and then losing my job, and then going on and going on and going on and finding the love of my life.
So I'm actually going to go with that, and that's a really good segue into our next thing that we would like to, our next topic we would like to hear you guys' answer about. But although there's been challenges, obviously, really extremely difficult challenges, sometimes, like Katie just said, there's some things that can be positive. So think about some things. What are some positive changes that has come from your diagnosis?
Not hearing my husband tell me I can't shop. I didn't hear it.
Yes, I love it. That's wonderful.
I think it forced me to slow down a little bit, and I also, you know, it sounds hokey, but I feel a real tremendous sense of gratitude, and I lost a 20-year career that I really loved, and I've had to make peace with that. I think I had to mourn that a little bit, but I'm kind of just learning how to move forward.
Yeah, that's a good one. Just taking it day by day and sometimes just slowing down, living in the moment. Yeah, thank you.
So when I lost my job, I also got to spend a lot more time with my kiddo.
Perfect. Love that one. Wonderful. Thank you guys for sharing. I think although it's hard to see sometimes those positive, I think it's really important to reflect on that as well. So as we think about these positive and I don't want to say negative, but these other challenges, you know, it's important that we acknowledge them and think about them and see, you know, what can we do about it? Have we accepted them, or do we need to work on accepting them? What is in your control? So some of the physical changes that can happen with the brain tumor: headaches, appearance, your strength can start feeling a little weaker. Your speech may change. You're more tired. Your vision, as you mentioned there, your hearing, things like that. And you know, what's in your control? What can you do about these? So some things you can do is you can talk to your doctor, talk to a friend, you know, working on physical therapy, being proactive on these things. Kind of, we all just did the Cupid shuffle. You know, Robin and Neil talked this morning about you don't always want to get up and do those little things, but those are some things that can help that. Using different holistic options, acupuncture or aromatherapies, remembering to celebrate those small wins and to go on what Brian and Christy were saying yesterday, to not sweat the small stuff. Pamper yourself, go to a spa, allow yourself patience. You know, it's okay to get frustrated, acknowledge that frustration, but remind yourself it's okay. And it's okay to take breaks, and of course, eat and sleep. Easier said than done. Well, maybe not the eating, but easier said than done.
And I just wanted to add to that, when we're talking about these physical changes, you have a brain tumor. It's okay if you need to take a break and you need to sit down. You know, something we always say is we need to talk to ourselves the way that we would talk to a friend. If a friend was going through something like this, what would you say to them? And more often than not, you're going to be gentle with them. You're going to tell them, you know, it's okay, you're doing your best, or whatever words you might use. You're usually softer and gentler with your friends than we are with ourselves. We're so harsh to ourselves. But if we change that narrative and talk to ourselves the way that we would talk to others, it can really change our mindset and how we handle this craziness that we're going through when we get a diagnosis like this. So one of the other changes, I heard a few of you talk about this, are the social changes. You were sharing how you lost friends, but then you also made some new friends. You met the love of your life, which is incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, when you go through a brain tumor diagnosis, either as a patient or the caregiver, your relationships change. Christy Bishop talked about this yesterday too, about how she lost so many friends. Those relationships changed. If you're going to school, that looks different. Maybe you can't take as many classes, or maybe you have to take a whole year off because of your treatments. Work is different. You talked about not being able to drive to work anymore. How you handle your work schedule may look different. Loss of independence, we talked about that as well. No longer being able to do as much as you would have done for yourself before. The roles, your hobbies, everything looks so different, but just because it looks different doesn't mean you can't still engage in these things. It doesn't mean that you can't still have friends, you can't still go to school or work or do the things that you love. It's just you being you in a modified way. So what are some ways that you can work through these social changes and still get to do some of the things that you love just differently? Well, first, the most important thing is to take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself means not just taking care of yourself physically, but taking care of yourself mentally. And how we can do that is finding someone that we can talk to and listen to. Dr. Dunbar shared this morning, when you're looking for support, it's important to look at what are these people's skill set. Who's the person that I can turn to who can meet these specific needs that I have? And when it comes to talking to someone, you need to keep that in mind as well. So we have some examples here. Going to a support group is a great one. Your hospital or treatment center might have one. A local organization might have one. The ABTA does have a support group locator tool on our website. So if you need help finding one, you could always check our website. Social workers are a great resource, and I'm not just plugging that because I am a social worker, but they're great people to talk to about everything that you're going through, and they can help to connect you with resources. And a lot of healthcare centers have social workers that you can talk to. And then a mentor. We try to talk to our friends about what we're going through when we have a diagnosis like this, but if they haven't had the diagnosis themselves, they can empathize, but they can't truly relate. They don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. And when you have a mentor, someone that's actually walked that walk themselves, who's had the same type of brain tumor, the same treatments that you're going through, it's totally different because they can say, I went through that. I know exactly what side effect you're talking about. This is what it was like for me. They can validate those feelings and emotions and maybe even share some of the resources that help them. And I will put a plug in for the ABTA's mentor program. We do have a peer mentoring program that connects both patients and caregivers one-on-one with a mentor that has gone through a very similar experience. And if you're interested in learning more, Vince, who is my colleague who manages this program, is here today at the ABTA booth. So please stop by and talk to him if you're interested in talking to a mentor.
I'm gonna add one thing just because we're proud of it. We just had hit a milestone and we just made 1,000 matches just a few months ago. So it's been a really great program. I'm so proud of Ambreen and Vince. Vince manages it, but Ambreen steps in and helps, and she helped kind of remodify it and create it. So it's an amazing program. So if it is something, and it's for patients and caregivers, so if it is something that is of interest, please come let us know and we'll get you figured out how to sign up.
Thank you. And then one that I'm going to say is hard for me is asking for help. I struggle with this because I'm like, I can do this. I want to be strong. I want to be independent. But it's so important to recognize when you need help, and it's okay to ask for help. Your friends, your family, whoever is your support system, they want to help you. And if you can tell them specific actions to take to support you, more often than not, they will support you. And if you don't have a strong support system, then there's ways that you can build one through your community, like going to a support group, connecting with a mentor, or different advocacy organizations. And then finding the positives. So what Mindy did with that question, we talked about what is the biggest challenge, but then what's a positive change after a brain tumor diagnosis? focus so much on the negatives because it is a negative. Having a brain tumor is not a positive thing, but there are some positive changes that come from it. And some of you guys were gracious enough to share those examples. And if we can remind ourselves of those positive moments, it can take us out of dark places when we start to sink into them. And seeking out new hobbies is a great one too. If you like to read, but you have a hard time focusing on a page or just getting through one page is so difficult now because of your tumor, maybe there's a different way you could do it. Maybe you could listen to an audiobook or listen to podcasts. That's something I love to do now. And then asking for accommodations. So there are a lot of accommodations available for us, and sometimes we might not really think about it. If you're going to school, your school's Services for Disability office will have accommodations that they can set up for you. All you have to do is ask. Set up a meeting with them, meet with them, let them know what you're going through, and it's pretty simple. But usually what they'll ask is just a letter from your doctor verifying whatever it is that you're going through. They don't even have to give specifics of your diagnosis, just verifying that you're at this treatment center, and they'll help figure out what accommodations you need. For me, when I was going through my cancer, I had a note taker that helped to take notes, which was a huge help because I could not focus when I was in lectures. I was given accommodated schedules for my tests where I could have longer time because it took me so long to read through a question on a test and I couldn't finish it in just 45 minutes. So there are accommodations available for you. You just have to ask for them. And the same goes for work. Legally, your work is required to accommodate for you. If you need a different work schedule, you can't work 9 to 5, or you need to work remotely some days, or you can't work 5 days a week because of your treatment schedule, your work will and should accommodate for you. And if they are not, you can advocate for yourself and get the support that you need. I will encourage you to reach out to our care line, either by email or by phone. That's a great place to start if you don't know exactly how to receive some of these accommodations, and one of us would be happy to talk to you over the phone or through email to help you get that figured out.
Thank you, Ambreen. And I'll just add to our care line. So our care line is not outsourced. It's not a bunch of people sitting in a call center. It is Ambreen, Emily, who's in the back, Vince, who is walking around. He has not been on stage, but Vince and me. So the four of us are the ones that are answering that. Oh, and Catherine. Hi, Catherine. Oh, we're not live streamed today. Never mind. Catherine is our wonderful intern for the last several months. She lives in Florida, so could not join us, but she also is on the care line as well. So it is a personal line that you call for us to help you with anything you have questions on. So we went through physical changes, we went through social changes, next to emotional changes that can happen. Although this slide does say journey of a person with a glioma, I think this applies to any type of brain tumor. I can't really see it on here, so I'm going to turn this way. So you guys are all kind of familiar. So these are the different kind of stages that you go, or the phases. So you have pre-diagnosis, you're going bright horizons, everything's fine. Then phase number 2, seeking help and probable diagnosis. You're blindsided, you may feel calm, but then you get the MRI results and there's some shock. And then phase 3, you have this acute treatment. You're in like just kind of the twilight zone, like everything just happened all at once. Like I don't even know what's happening right now. And so, but then after you go through treatment, it's kind of a relief, but then you're like, well, what next? And it's fear. And then phase 4, you're immediately recovering, and you're just kind of confused and kind of in the dark about, with that fear of what's happening next. But then you might have some gratitude that treatment is over. But then you're thinking, I'm a different person now, or I've lost this, or I've lost that, and you might start going through some grief and frustration. Then you go into long-term recovery and treatment. And it's kind of this dark adaptation, and you have to learn to resolve, but then you become weary. And then hopefully, after a year, but maybe several years, when you're in surveillance for long-term survivors, you may find some glimmers of hope and some empowerment. But then you also, you have that MRI every 3 to 6 months, And there's that kind of powerlessness that it continues and you're still scared. And then you may have a recurrence and you become overshadowed. But then somehow you learn to become resilient. And then you may have some pessimism as well. But learning how to get through that and to be resilient. So as we think about those changes, it's important to name them. Like, it's okay to have those feelings. It's fine. Like, it's not something that needs to be held on to, and it's okay to say it. So stop. Just take a moment, name what you're feeling, slow down for a second, see if you can take some deep breaths, maybe do some calming music, maybe you just go for a walk, and that can help lower the intensity of the feeling. And then think about it, problem solve, and act, and implement a solution on how to move forward. So this is an interesting kind of emotion color wheel is what I call it. I don't know if that's officially what it's called, but that's what I'm going with. But this was developed by American psychologist Dr. Robert Plutchik, and he proposed that there are 8 primary emotions that serve as the foundation for all others. And you'll see these not in the middle, but in the outer circle. So we see joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, anticipation, anger, and disgust. So this can help bring you clarity on what the emotion is and how it ties together. So each basic emotion then has a polar opposite. So you have fear on one side versus anger on the other. So fear kind of going into being small and hiding versus anger where, it's very loud and yelling. Then we had the combination, so the ones that have no color are combinations of emotions. So joy plus trust can equal love. And then the colors represent intensity. So you notice the center is very dark. So they're very intense emotions. And then as you move outwards, they get less, they're less intensified. So for instance, if you look at anger at its least, it's annoyance. But then as it moves forward and forward, or maybe you hold on to it and you don't accept it or acknowledge it and you just let it build and build, you can see how it can start just a little bit more annoying, a little more annoying, then you're angry, and then it turns into this all-out rage. And the same thing with any of the other ones. So, if you're, let's see a good one here. So, acceptance. And like I said, these don't have to be all bad. Some of these are good. You have some acceptance, and then you earn trust, and then it's more admiration for somebody or something. So it's just looking at these and understanding that for those negative emotions, not negative emotions, but those emotions that cause troublesome, acknowledging them and seeing where you're at, stopping, slowing down, thinking about them, and then figuring out how to move forward.
I just wanted to add to that it's so important to just sit with your emotions sometimes. If you're feeling sad and you want to cry, that's totally fine. Sit there and let yourself cry if you need to. But the important thing is that we don't just sit there and keep crying. At some point, you have to pick yourself back up, as hard as it might be, brush yourself off, wipe those tears, and get up and keep going. That's just what we have to do. Christy, I think, talked about...
driveway crying.
Right, driveway crying in the driveway when you're behind the wheel. It's okay to do that if you need to do that. So we talked about some of these emotional changes. When you get a brain tumor diagnosis, you're blindsided. It comes out of nowhere. Yesterday, you were totally fine. You're happy. You're going to work. You're driving yourself. And then next thing you know, you're sitting there, you got your MRI results, and you have a tumor, and now you're shocked. You're angry. So Emotional change is a part of that experience. But we can control our emotions. We can learn to name them, like how Mindy showed us how to do, and use them to empower ourselves and move forward. So these are just some examples of what we can do to help cope with the emotional changes after a brain tumor diagnosis. Like I mentioned before, it's so important to care for yourself. What are some ways that you can take care of yourself? It's just doing the things that you love, the little things. I think Dr. Dunbar talked about it, right? Focusing on the small moments. The little things are the ones that tend to matter the most in the end. It could be just listening to your favorite song or doing the Cupid Shuffle with your friends, reading a book. It doesn't have to be some kind of big getting on a plane, going to Europe. You can do that if you have the means to do that, but if you don't, then it's just taking that time to pause, do something you like, focus on your breathing if you need to, and just being mindful and patient and kind with yourself. So while we're talking about some of the emotional changes that come along with a brain tumor, I wanted to talk about the stages of grief. We're all here and we're grieving. We're grieving our past self, who we used to be before we or our loved one was diagnosed with a tumor, because when you get that label tacked on, you're not the same person anymore. And you are kind of going through this grieving process of who you used to be. So we all kind of know the 5 stages of grief. I'm going to go through this quickly. There's the denial, where you can't really believe this is happening, or this can't be happening to me. There's the anger of why is this happening to me, or being angry that this is happening. Bargaining, saying, what did I do to deserve this? Or, I'll pray more. If I pray more, it'll go away. And then the depression, that deep sadness when it sinks in that, oh my gosh, I'm going through this is happening. And then acceptance, when you accept, okay, I have a brain tumor, it's going to be part of my life, but I can get through this one day at a time. And with these 5 stages of grief, it's not linear. You're not going to go from denial to acceptance. You're going to go all over the place. You can go from denial one day to acceptance another day to now I'm bargaining, now I'm depressed, now I'm angry. And sometimes you can be feeling all of it all at once. You can feel all of it in the same hour, in the same day. And it's just acknowledging that this is part of the journey. And even though you're not the same person you were before, you're somebody new, or not entirely new. You're a modified version of yourself.
And I want to add, too, that doesn't just apply to the patient or the survivor. That applies to caregivers as well. Caregivers are going through the same thing in the same way. But then we wanted to remind of the 6th stage. So the 6th stage of grief is actually finding meaning. So just, what is your meaning now? And what can you do now? You've gone through these stages, you've denied, you've bargained, you've accepted, and now let's find where you're at now. So it's not about bouncing back, but it's moving forward. Folding the existence of your previous self into your new and modified self. How do you behave in response to your diagnosis? Some people, maybe it's just you're helping others more. Or Brian and Christy yesterday mentioned their awkward dance out of the radiation treatment when they were in the lobby before they left, being that inspiration to somebody else. Finding purpose and tapping into gratitude. So what does that purpose look like for you? So is it advocacy? Is it volunteering? Writing a book? Starting a blog? Maybe it's just spending more time with your friends and family.
I think we had a duplicate there. So yeah, like Mindy said, it's just acknowledging where are you right now and where can you go from here. So we talked about some of the different stages, and you could take a moment to reflect on some of these stages and think about right now in this moment, where do you feel you lie in this list of 6? And I'd like to to hear from some of you. If you'd like to share, if you want to raise your hand and share, where do you think you are right now? Do you feel like you're in denial? Are you angry? Are you in a state of acceptance or trying to find meaning? Would anyone like to share?
She's going to bring you a microphone.
Sorry. It's been 5 years since I had my surgeries. I had 5 over a period of 2 years. And I did kind of wander for a while, you know. I had a career of 20 years, and it was a career I really loved, and I can't do it anymore. And so trying to find something with, you know, some purpose in it, that's been hard. And just trying to, I mean, after these kind of things happen, you have a new appreciation for life, but that doesn't mean you don't have shitty days, sorry for the French. And so I guess it's just trying to find the balance.
Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to share? All right, thank you. So I think you highlighted some important points when you shared where you feel like you are. You know, you're in between that 5 and 6, trying to find acceptance and finding new purpose. You can't work in the same career as before because of everything that you've been through. And you're trying to find how to still incorporate all those parts of your past self into this new version of yourself. You know, we always say that you have a brain tumor, but your brain tumor does not define who you are. And that can become a part of who you are. It can be part of your story, but it's not the entire picture. It doesn't completely define you. So some ways that we can learn to incorporate this new version of ourselves, we have some tools listed here, some things that might help. And it's important to find what works for you. Not everything fits every person. You know, one shoe doesn't fit everyone. There are some different things that might work for different people. For some people, it's sharing their story. You know, like some of our wonderful patient and care partner advocates that spoke during our conference. They love to share their story. That's how they find meaning and purpose from what they went through. It's talking to other people, sharing their story. It could be on a stage, like at the national conference. It could be online in the form of a blog or maybe a podcast, making those connections with other people. So, you know, taking that difficult gift that has been given to you, the brain tumor diagnosis, and turning it into a hand that you can reach out to help the next person who may be going through the same thing. That's one way that you could find some meaning or some purpose in what you're going through. Incorporating different tools and resources. We listed a couple. Mindy's going to highlight a couple towards the end. You know, reaching out to organizations like the ABTA, asking for help when you need it. Prioritizing your mental health, finding professional mental health support when you need it. There's no shame in seeking counseling and support. And then communicating. It's so important to be able to be self-aware. A piece of being self-aware is recognizing and naming your emotions and being able to acknowledge where you are. Communicate with your friends and family so they know how you're feeling, so they know that you need a break. Communicate with your healthcare team so they're aware of the side effects that you're experiencing, and if it's a good healthcare team, they're going to help you cope with those side effects. If you can't work anymore, you can't do the things that you love because of a side effect you're experiencing, it's so important to communicate that with your team so that they can make modifications where necessary. Your quality of life is just as important as the length of your life. And your mental well-being is important too, so please don't forget to take care of your mental health as well as your physical health. So we have to think about what is most important to you. If you can't work the same job anymore, the same career that meant so much to you, what is something else that is important to you? When you think about your day-to-day, what is one of the most important factors in your life? This can be working, this can be a hobby, this can be your family or your friends. It can be just having time to laugh or sip a coffee with a friend. Being pain-free is an example of something that could be most important to you. I want you to think about that. What is most important to you when you think about your quality of life? Would anyone like to share something that is most important?
Sorry, thank you. Well, the work I did was my passion, and I have been slowly, as you may have heard, turning that work back into my primary creative pursuit at home, and that has been kind of rewarding to be able to do it not for a boss, not for a customer, and not for money. I do it for fun and for other people just out of love, and that's been, since not working, a really huge change that's been fundamental for me.
Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to share? What is something that's most important to you in your quality of life, in your day-to-day? Okay. I'll share personally. For me, I was super focused on my studies. I was the type of person who had to have straight A's. So when I was diagnosed with cancer as a college student, that was not good for me because I was like, no, I need to be studying. I cannot drop my classes. And when I had to, because I was just too sick, it was devastating for me. And I hated not being at my top peak performance. But it was in that moment that I was finally able to take a break. I was able to put aside my science books, my chemistry book, not study, and actually think about, okay, I'm not studying now, and studying was my whole life before. What can I do now? And I remembered I like to write. I love writing. I love to paint. And I haven't done that in so long because I was so focused on I have to pass every single test. And I was able to do that. And I was able to just write. And that, to me, was a form of therapy, just being able to write poems or short stories about what I was experiencing. And sometimes it wouldn't even be about cancer. It would be a random fantasy short story that I made up. And I didn't have time to do that before. And all of a sudden, I got this terrible gift of time because I had cancer. And I was able to just do a small thing that meant a lot to me. And I wasn't doing it for A's or a grade. I was doing it just for me because it made me happy. That's a way that I was able to focus on my quality of life, even though I couldn't do something that meant a lot to me. So what are some things that you can do starting today? When you leave this room, when you go back home after the conference, what are some actionable steps that you can take that can help you to find that meaning, find a purpose, and redefine yourself after your brain tumor diagnosis?
So the first one you guys are all already doing. You're all attending this session. You're all attending the national conference just in general. That is a great way to start. Visit the wellness room. If you have not been in there yet, please go check it out. Just take some time, sit back in a zero gravity chair, turn the neck massager on, close your eyes, and just relax, even if it's just 2 minutes. Go take advantage of that. Find one thing that makes you happy and do it. Acknowledge those emotions like we talked about earlier. Be angry. Like we said, that's fine too. Yell, get mad, scream into a pillow. Live in the moment. Really stop and just be where you are and recognize what's going on and focus just on that. Find support and connect with others. I hope you all have been networking and connecting with each other throughout this conference. And for those of you that are on Whova, I love seeing all of the connections and meetups and discussion topics that are happening on there too. And I really hope you walk away from this conference with somebody that you can reach out to and talk to. It's so important to know that you're not alone and then you're not the only one going through this. Try something new or something like Ambreen said that you used to do that you kind of lost touch with. Start painting, writing, sewing, stitching, knitting. However, cry, yell, or cheer. Find gratitude again. Participate in patient advocacy. We have at the ABTA several volunteer options to to help in several different ways, whether it's something, patient advocacy for everybody can mean something else. Me personally, I am not as outgoing in patient advocacy. My parents both have neurological disorders, and I don't do a lot of outward-facing volunteer for Parkinson's or strokes. And instead, I would rather do more behind-the-scenes kind of stuff. Maybe it's just randomly doing, a virtual 5K, but it's just kind of just a few things here and there, or reviewing materials to see if they're, patient-facing and if they're good. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes things that can be done if you're not somebody that is as outgoing and wanting to share your story or wanting to rally together a huge team at an on-site 5K. There's other things that can be done too if you find that could be something that you could find a new purpose or new meaning. And then finally, just be you. Just be you. Sit with that and be happy with who you are and that you're here and that you have all of us in this conference surrounding you.
I wanted to add to that last point there of being you. Mindy said it's not about bouncing back. It's not about going back to who you were before a brain tumor, because you can't do that. We can't go back in time. We can't change it. We can't be who we were before, but we can move forward. You are somebody different now, but that does not have to be a bad thing. You shared some examples of those positive changes. You have learned things. You've realized you're way more resilient than you ever thought that you could be. So it's not about going back to who we were before. It's about moving forward to who we are now and who we're going to be tomorrow and each and every day from there. So we talked about, finding meaning, finding purpose, and a big piece of that for some people is patient advocacy. And I do want to just add the caveat here that, like Mindy said, patient advocacy is not for everyone. If it's not for you, that's okay. You don't have to be, a spokesperson. You don't have to be out there putting yourself out there if you don't want to be. You can be behind the scenes, like some of the examples that Mindy shared. A great example of a way that you can still give back and use what you've been through to make a difference without being so outward about it is through research. We shared some great ways that patients and caregivers can engage in research opportunities. A really cool institute that I'm a huge fan of is PCORI. I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with it. It stands for Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute. And they have amazing volunteer opportunities where you can join different groups focused on different issues, disparities in healthcare, clinical trials, specific tumor types or diagnosis, and you give back just by reading through different research papers, providing your feedback on, is this patient-friendly, is this not patient-friendly? So you can find a way to use your own experiences as a patient to improve outcomes for other patients without having to put your face out there, put your story out there if you don't want to. And we already shared some examples of other ways that you can advocate. You can advocate just by talking to others. I hope that you guys have been able to connect with others who share similar experiences at this conference and can keep those connections moving forward. Honestly, that's a way of advocating. You just reaching your hand out, shaking the hand of somebody else who's next to you, sharing your story. It is advocacy because you can share those shared experiences and let someone know that you're not alone in this. So connecting, giving back. Giving back doesn't mean always focused on the brain tumor. You could give back through organizations like the ABTA if you want to focus on your brain tumor. Some people, they have a brain tumor and they don't want to think about it. And that's okay. You can do that too. Focus on something else that matters to you. I love animals. I volunteer at a wildlife center where I help to rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife. That has nothing to do with my cancer, but I love it because it's something that I enjoy. I enjoy being surrounded by animals. So find a way that you can give back so that you're spending your time in a way that is meaningful to you, whatever that might mean. And volunteering in different ways. It could be at a 5K, it could be doing a webinar, it could be sharing your story. There's tons of ways that you can find to use your time. and I'll have Mindy share a few examples of some great volunteer opportunities.
So how can you participate in patient advocacy? And like Ambreen said, this doesn't just have to be with the ABTA. Of course, yes, we would love for you guys to be volunteers with us and help us out. But like Ambreen said, she volunteers at rehabbing wildlife animals. I think you're crazy, but I think it's really cool. My dream volunteer job is, for those of you seeing Rosie and Tozy this week, when I was a nurse in the hospital, that was the best. Like, I loved it when therapy dogs would come in the hospital. Just the faces on the patients, and not just the patients, but the staff, the nurses who are running around like crazy. We're just trying to just stay on 2 feet, and these cute little puppies come in, and no matter what, you find a way to make that the highlight of your day. You can't find time to go to the bathroom, but you can find time to sit down and pet a dog, for a couple seconds. So that is my dream job. It's just something that can just bring some lightheartedness to your day. So, but specifically for the ABTA, Ambreen mentioned our mentorship program that we have, sharing your story. There are some websites or organizations too where you can share your story, but it's just kind of like you talking, and you don't have to say your name, you don't have to do anything else, and it just kind of goes there. Or you could just share your story on a tape recorder. Wait, the tape recorders exist anymore? I don't know. Maybe not. Record yourself on your phone, I don't know. And then just have it sit there. You don't have to share it with anybody else, but sometimes it's good to just talk it out to yourself. We also have a peer review program with our research grants. So the ABTA Alumni Research Network was here up until Friday, and this is who we award grants to. So we actually have volunteers that help read through their research proposals and help decide on which ones should get the grant. So there's interesting opportunities like that you may not be aware of. Reviewing educational resources. We have volunteers that we have help read through what's on our website and say, does this make sense to you? Is it too hard to understand? How can we make it so it's understandable for you and that we're not writing a medical book? Fundraising, participating in 5Ks. We exhibit at conferences throughout the country. So you don't just, although we are headquartered in Chicago, we have opportunities throughout the country of how you guys can be involved and come together. Starting a blog. Social media, we have, if anybody's on TikTok, there's social media brain tumor TikToks all over the place that you can watch or that you can do. Attending conferences like this, and then rallies on the Hill is also another way. So with that, I know we just have a few minutes left for questions, but got to go with our theme here. So meet hope head on. Find what you're hopeful for, and just be you.
Can you clarify the name of that organization? I got down patient-centered, outcome-based something.
Yeah, Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute.
Research, say it again?
Institute.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great organization where they're really focused on amplifying the patient voice when it comes to research, improving research by incorporating the patient voice. So they have a few different opportunities, and feel free to look into it and see what works for you and what you might be interested in.
This has all been very helpful. I have just something to add that I've run across. Like when you mentioned about going through cancer and then how it changed you as far as just what you wanted to do next with your life that was meaningful. There's a researcher from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. His name is Richard Tedeschi, Tedeschi. Okay. I did a dissertation that involved this area that he has researched. He might make a good speaker sometime. His book, one of the books is The Post-Traumatic Growth Workbook. and the subtitle is Coming Through Trauma, Wiser, Stronger, and More Resilient. He studied families that lost a child, studied cancer patients, Iraq veterans, just looking at trauma all across life, okay? And came up with patterns where people, he called it post-traumatic growth. You know, how did they come out of those experiences? Some people, rather than going down the drain and being totally devastated by the trauma they experienced, how did they come out, as he was saying, wiser, stronger, all of that. So that's the research that he's done in that area, and it cuts across all areas. And they define trauma as something where it, again, turns your whole world upside down. And if you qualify for that, there are people that have gone through that and came out stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And he studied, like, well, what did they do with their life? What were the patterns in their life that helped them to get onto that path after the trauma? So,
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely look into that. Sounds like it could be a great topic for a future conference. Does anyone else have any questions?
It's not really a question, but just a comment. I'm the caregiver. My wife had a tumor, and a lot of the things you talked about, I find myself thinking we're guilty of ourselves. And when you went through the grief thing, I think I went through that to a degree, not a degree, a lot. And one of the things that she wanted to do right from the beginning, we found a couple of support groups. I don't like that term, but that's what they call them. And I would question her, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to rehash the past? You're beyond that. You know, you're over it. And why do you want to keep going? Doesn't that stir up bad feelings, et cetera, et cetera? And I had realized I was the one wanting to ignore it and compartmentalize it and bury it and deny it. And what I've found over the years is she's kind of pulled me in, dragging and kicking. We now can help others. You know, we're past it. She's like, I think, going on 11 years post-tumor. And when we go to these things, I kind of step back and watch her, the new people coming in. She can kind of mentor them and work with them, and I realize that it's a good thing. I was trying to deny it happened. Let's ignore it. Let's move on and you know, forget it. But really, it's a good thing. And so when you have discussions like this, it's not just the, I don't like some words, it's not the victim, it's also the caregiver that goes through that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And you're absolutely right. Everything that we shared, it doesn't just apply to the patient, it applies to the caregivers and the care partners too. You know, you, as a caregiver, you are grieving too. You're just like we change after we get a diagnosis, our caregivers, our supporters, they also change. You're no longer the same person you were before your wife's diagnosis. So all of this applies to you as well. And thank you for sharing your own personal experience with us.
Ambreen, we have one more.
Yeah.
And this one will be quick. I first shared, you know, about having a loss of a sense, my hearing. But, you know, I'm a woman, I'm vain. I'm also a liar because I like to tell people I'm 30. And that at the time I was able to cut my hair, color it, you know, put all kinds of chemicals. Well, now I'm stuck with a, you know, diagnosis. I'm going to have to cut my hair. What do I do with that? So I let it go. I've been white for a long time. There goes my 30 lie. So I had to give up that. But in doing so, I was able to say, and it wasn't even me. A lady approached me and she goes, "Oh my God, it's at your hair," you know. And I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at her. You know, we discussed not wanting to be our diagnosis, but to inform. she goes, I would like to know if you'd like to model your hair. So something good came out of it. It's not so much a question as in look for the opportunities. And it was said yesterday, you never know who's looking at you. And something that I saw as a negative, because I wanted to keep lying and coloring my hair, someone else saw the beauty in it. As a result, I have modeled my hair for a national, opportunity because of giving up something, I gained something else.
That's
so
amazing.
Just encouragement.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's awesome. I just wanted to add, so I was a hairstylist before I became a nurse, and people pay lots of money to get their hair that color. So luckily I didn't have to pay for it, but I spent years and years spending a lot of time trying to get my hair that color. It never got that way, so.
Well, that is all the time that we have. I just wanted to add something real quick because you're talking about hair, and I lost my hair when I had chemo, and you would think maybe it doesn't matter as much to me because I wear a hijab, I cover my hair, nobody knows, but I knew, and that it was hard losing my hair. But I'll say, you sharing your story about cutting your hair, that was a way that I took control back when I noticed that my hair started falling out in chunks, and it was very traumatizing. I said, you know what, I have to shave it. I didn't let the cancer and the chemo take all of my hair. I decided I wanted to shave it before that could happen, and we had so much fun with it. I was with my mom and my sisters, and I had really long hair, and we started by cutting it shorter. Look, this is what it would look like if you had a pixie cut or if you had a mohawk. And then finally in the end, we shaved it all off. And the whole time we were doing that, we were literally laughing so hard that we were crying, and that is one of my favorite memories. And it's crazy to think about it because I was losing my hair, and yet that's my favorite memory. So I just wanted to share that, just in those difficult moments, you can find joy. There's ways that you can find joy. I just want to thank you guys so much for sharing your experiences and being open with us, and I hope that you can have some actionable steps that you can take to move forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you.